Hi, hello, and welcome or welcome back, I suppose. Yes, I have a tiny little pink microphone now. I have no idea how well this is going to work. Now, it appears to sound a bit crisper, but I do have to consider that I have to now sync audio because I can't connect it directly to my phone. I am going to see if I can get an adapter for it because that would make my life far easier, much easier. And yes, in an easier world I could have this rested somewhere, but I've noticed, because I did a couple of test runs just of recording it, that if I have it actually on my desk it's too far away and it sounds really quiet, and then I have to edit all of the sound, and I don't really want to have to spend too much time editing sound. I just want to have the video and the audio synced for the most part. Anyway, last review of the year. This has been wild. Now, even just generally when I get to this time of year, I have that kind of looking back going, oh my god, there's been so much. And if I look right back to the beginning, I go, oh my god, was that this year? But this year has been even more so with that, I think, just because we're now approaching one whole year of this channel, and that's mad to me. It's just I don't know how that happened either. But anyway, let's get on to the review, shall we? Today we're looking at Gifts by Laura Barnett, rounding out the year with something seasonal and cozy. So this chapter follows one by one 12 people as they figure out what gift they want to get, essentially, if you will, for the next person. So we have one story figuring out a gift that they can get for someone, and then the receiver of that gift becomes the gift giver in the next story, and it essentially functions as 12 short stories that flow together rather than necessarily one continual plot. There's obvious overlap between the stories, and you probably couldn't just pick one and just read it, but it does read a lot more like a short story collection on the whole. You couldn't read them out of order, but you could take your time with this book. Maybe do a 12 days of Christmas type thing and do one a day. That might be quite sweet. It's a slice of life, really. It's generally the kind of thing that I try to gravitate towards. I don't need to mention names. If you've seen any of my other reviews, you know the sort of people that I'm talking about. Sometimes there's romantic elements in there, not always, but in this case there's bits of romance in there, but it's generally just learning people's stories. Within each of the gift giving parts of the story, they're kind of like the base of each story, that you know what you're getting as you go in, that you go, okay, this is going to be about giving a gift, but you actually learn something about the person and their relationships and delve into their life for a few pages. Something that I really did enjoy was, well, not enjoyed necessarily, but something that I kind of noticed and appreciated was that, as with many books in this kind of genre, it doesn't completely shy away from some of the darker topics that people deal with in day-to-day life, but it's also very clear that it has a line of how far it wants to delve in. It's aware that on the whole this is a light-hearted book, but at the same time it is slice of life, and life isn't all sunshine and roses, which sounds kind of bleak now that I think about it. Also, I now do have a running timer to see how long I've been talking. I mean, my video will be slightly longer than my audio in this case, because I just pressed the camera on before I turned the recording on for the mic, which is why I'm nervous about My brain not fucking working. I'm nervous about syncing it up. I'm literally just using my computer's audio recording device and filming on my phone. I don't know how this is gonna work. And all I can think of, because our video's been doing the rounds again, is that football fan being asked questions and he just goes on the mic, and I'm not gonna let the intrusive thoughts win, and I'm not just gonna on the mic, but it's there and I want to, and I think it would be funny. Anyway, like I was saying with darker topics, it's not dismissive of any of these topics, it gives them the respect they deserve. For example, there's a man with Alzheimer's, there are a couple of people who are attending meetings, which I can't remember if any kind of AA or NA or anything like that. I don't remember if anything like that is specifically mentioned, but I think it's more a kind of general meetup for people who've come out of using those places and now they're meeting. I'm not 100% sure, but you know, it still dips its toes in, but knows that it's not going to go too far in, mostly because it doesn't necessarily have the time. Like I said, this is more like a collection of really quite short stories. It's only about, I would say, 10 to 15 pages per person, as it were. My biggest complaint with this is this is going to sound kind of petty, but the way that Laura Barnett structures a lot of her sentences. Now, I realise I made a mistake when I mentioned run-on sentences before. I believe that would have been talking about the Spanish love deception, and then right at the beginning of whatever book I read after that, maybe Virgin Suicides, but turns out run-on sentences is the grammatically incorrect version, and I'm thinking of compound sentences, but quite frankly, it's not something I think about every day. And yes, I do have reading and writing degrees effectively, but like, doesn't mean I'm always thinking about that. But anyway, she uses a lot of compound sentences, and they're so bulky and stuffy, and it just with some writers, you spot it once or twice and you go, okay, it's a bit irritating, but you can generally see what they're saying. I just wish that they would split it up. In this case, I genuinely wish I could go over this entire book with a pen and go, split that up, split that up, split that up. Please just split that sentence up. There's one towards the end. I had to read it multiple bloody times to get anywhere near. But like, on the whole, you know what you're going into with those sorts of books. You know that it's probably going to be a bit flowery, as it were. But with books like this, I tend to go into them expecting this to be for a kind of general audience. This is pop fiction, meaning that you're going to want most people to be able to read it. This is the sort of thing, I would say, where it's kind of, maybe you didn't pack a book and you just want something quick and simple to read when you're home for the holidays with your parents or something. But no, that's not what we get. We get flowery bullshit, and not in Laura Barnett's defense, but I will say that a lot of pop fiction writers, I think, try to almost elevate their writing using compound sentences like this. And again, when I say that it's like, oh, sentence structure is the issue here, it almost sounds petty, but like, it's not just once or twice, it's something really noticeable, and sentence structure is like the basis for everything else. If your sentences aren't structured well enough, your reader isn't going to be able to, well, read. So it did become a real issue, and it's a shame because I genuinely really enjoyed this book. It's just that that aspect of it really stuck out. So I can't remember the name of it. I will put it in here. She has another book which apparently did really well. That sounds like I was being really dismissive. I haven't. The name sounded kind of familiar, but it wasn't one that I've read. It's not one that I think I've had on any reading list. But I might give that a look to see if it's any different, to see if it's just this book, because I'm always kind of curious to see if it's an author issue or a book issue, because I generally, unless a book is utter dog shit, try not to judge an author too much on how their book is written, kind of thing. By that I mean, I'm happy to judge E.L. James or Anna Todd for the dog shit they put into the world, but I'm not going to start judging, like, Laura Barnett for me not enjoying the ways in which she structured this book. Because this book wasn't bad, it just had some issues, which is fine. That's how most books work. Some books are really enjoyable for everyone, some books are less enjoyable, you know. I'll possibly be going into this a little bit more at some point, but like, I've been watching some people talk about Colleen Hoover, and I can't remember how much I went into detail on it in my review now, because it was my last big video before the Iron Maiden one, but that took a lot of my like mental capacity, to be honest. And the way that has really mixed reviews, which absolutely understandable, because it doesn't go into enough detail, but also it's pop fiction, so it has a certain audience, but it needs to be a bit more specific, and you know, really interesting discourse. The rest of her stuff, everything I see about it, and there's a particular reviewer who I really trust the way she talks about books. She mostly does talk about awful fiction. That's not all she talks about on her channel, but her book reviews have become really firm favourites of mine, and that's Elise. I think she's just called Elise, isn't she? I don't know if she's still Elise Yeezy, because I think she's talking about getting rid of the Yeezy for, you know, obvious Kanye reasons. But, you know, she's spoken about, in one of her recent videos, I think it's called November 9th, and I'm really curious about reading that now with It Ends With Us in mind, because It Ends With Us, while not being quite in depth enough, it does have an exploration of the way abuse works. And some people argue it's like, oh, but he's really romanticised at the beginning and then it turns into this abusive narrative. But for me, I go, yeah, that's how abusive relationships often work. You don't go into an abusive, most people at the very least, don't go into an abusive relationship going, oh my god, he's entirely red flags, he seems like the one for me, and then like go, wow, he's abusive, who'd have thought? They go, wow, I'm in love with this man, the version of himself that he's presenting towards me, and he's beautiful, he's this, and he seems like he's perfect, and then shit happens, right? And I think that's reflected quite well in that book. But looking at November 9th, I do have an issue with the way it ends, though, like 100%, and I feel like I definitely mentioned that in my review, that was a real point of irritation for me, the way it ends. It's like, oh, well, he kind of apologised, and it's like, I enjoyed the way it's talking about breaking cycles of abuse, but I don't think I went enough into details about how it is a little bit reductive in the way it personally talks about it. I think I read a bit too much into it. I went a bit too much like, yeah, but if you actually read into it, it's like, yeah, but what's actually on the page, kind of thing, which I do have a bit of habit with. But, you know, I'm on a wait list at my library to read her newest one, like the sequel to It Ends With Us. I think it Ends With Us. I think it's called It Starts With Us. I'm on the wait list for that because I'm curious about it, and I am thinking of getting November 9th because it It's awful. Because the point I was making was that, I know this is like far off what I was talking about with this book, but quite frankly, I'm allowed to ramble. It's me, what do you expect? She did write a book which was in condemnation of abuse, and I mean, obviously, as you fucking should, despite how good or bad you think the way she pulled it off, at bare minimum the intent was abusers bad, for want of a more eloquent phrase. But everything I've seen, because I looked into it a little bit more after watching Elise's video, November 9th is just abuse. I'm falling into every version of, yay, this abuser's wonderful, isn't this the perfect romance, isn't this what you want? And not to harp back on names that I mentioned earlier, but because they're the ones that people know, look at things like After, things like 50 Shades, or even look at Twilight, who is the original sin in a lot of fucking cases, where it's like, yay, we love abuse because he's hot, yay. No, stop it, give it a rest. But look, anyway, in terms of gifts by Laura Barnett, I genuinely did really like this book. The actual stories and the characters were all wonderful, and you know me, I'm very character driven when it comes to the stories that I gravitate towards. That's why I like slice of life. But it has its issues, and I'm curious about reading more from her, because I did like some aspects of it, and she has some other interesting writing styles that I can't quite put my finger on, but it's like there's a certain formality to it which was interesting, which I think kind of goes along with the fact that there's a lot of compound sentences. But there's something almost of an essay about her structuring, and I found that interesting, so I'd be curious to see what else she's written. But what we're going to do next is I'm going to see where I've put my tin down, and I'm going to find out what we're reading soon, not next, because, well, first thing in the new year you will be seeing Mouse by Art Spiegelman, if I remember correctly. Apologies if off the top of my head I can't remember that. Then we will have, this will be in the first week of the year, This Time Next Year by Sophie, I want to say Cousins. Again, this is all top of my head, so don't expect me to remember everything. And then let's see what we're doing the week after that, shall we? So we have All the Lonely People. I can't remember their first name, but I think it's by somebody Gale, Mike Gale. So give me a moment. So here it is, All the Lonely People, and like I said, that's by Mike Gale. I think I borrowed something of his before, but I never ended up actually reading it. I think it was, so when I first did Blind Date with the Book, I'd actually taken a few out. Like, I planned on doing it before, but I can't remember what happened, but something went wrong with it, so I was just like, right, I need to hard reset, so I just returned them, and then got more, and that was the first Blind Date with the Book that you saw. So, in phone calls to his daughter in Australia, widower Hubert Bird paints a picture of the perfect retirement, packed with fun and friendship. But Hubert Bird is lying. Something has made him turn his back on people, and he hardly sees a soul. So, when his daughter announces she's coming to visit, Hubert faces a race against time to make his real life resemble his fake life before he's found out. Along the way, Hubert renews a cherished friendship, is given a second chance at love, and even joins an audacious community scheme. But with the secret of his earlier isolation lurking in the shadows, is he destined to always be one of the lonely people? Which I can see why I picked that up, because again, that's obvious slice of life type stuff. And I think, if I remember rightly, I was like, oh, that reminds me a bit of the sort of thing that do I have anything? I don't think I have anything of his, but I've read, oh, I do, but I don't. Matt Haig, I can see it just there. I've got How to Stop Time on my shelf, but I previously reviewed The Midnight Library, and that had a kind of, do you mind? You know you're allowed to keep it down, and I'd appreciate it if you kept it down. I love living in a noisy neighbourhood. Anyway, yeah, it reminded me of a Matt Haig kind of plot. Just a little bit less fantastical. But in terms of just the ideas, I guess, dealing with... again, it's like, I like stuff that deals with darker topics, but in not necessarily a way where it's like, we're all sad and we all feel like shit all the time. Sometimes a little bit of lightheartedness, and I feel like this is definitely going to have that. You know, I like something that's going to sit in my soul and make me feel good afterwards, even if while I'm along for the ride I'm going to be sobbing. So, yeah. I hope you have a wonderful day, a wonderful night, a wonderful whenever you are watching this. Take care of yourselves. Right.